Welcome to the Hidden Palace with Skyblaze.
Hello my friends and welcome to the Hidden Palace here on Radio Sega. I am here, I am back, and World War III hasn't started, so I'm going to carry on regardless, because I think we could all use some cheering up today. So today I'm going to be talking about add-ons and peripherals. Those items that change your gaming experience, hopefully for the better, sometimes not so much. So let's start off with one that we all know about. Let's start off with the Sega 32X. The add-on for the Sega Mega Drive, known internally at Sega by the codename Project Mars. I'm sure it sounded like a great idea on paper to someone. Incidentally, the name Project Mars just makes me think of chocolate, which makes me sad because I can't eat chocolate. Yeah. But instead of bringing out an entirely new console, the 32X was designed to bolt onto the then aging Mega Drive console and give it a boost in power. It featured many graphical enhancements, including a much larger colour palette, better 3D graphics, and support for full motion video. It also had upgraded sound and featured a fairly new technology at that point called Q-Sound, which enabled multi-dimensional sound. Which sounds fancy, but it's actually a way for stereo sound to partially emulate the appearance of sound of the effect of surround sound. Appearance? Effect of surround sound. Clearly I've not had enough caffeine yet. However, the 32X had almost no third-party support, and it was discontinued only a year after release. And its total games library in the US was a mere 36 games. 36. Oh my god. And you thought that the PS4 had a poor games library upon release. Holy crap. And those 4 games included 4 games that were designed to work with the 32X and the Mega CD combined. I'll be talking a bit more about that later in the show. Other criticisms of the add-on were its aesthetics, as some people complained it looked like a really ugly mushroom growing out of the top of their Mega Drive. Which honestly, they had a point. Apparently, the idea was that it was supposed to look like the turbo unit on a muscle car, an American muscle car. If that was the idea, they probably should have made it chrome. Actually, that would have been cool. Never mind. Other people were complaining that its need for a separate AC adapter in addition to the Mega Drive one, which sounds like a kind of a whiny complaint until you remember that this was the 90s, and AC adapters for the Sega good machines, were all those massive plugs that you couldn't put next to anything else because they kind of ate the entire socket. And God help you if you were trying to put them on a power strip because you were out of luck. That got to the point where Sega actually had to release its own special power strip to accommodate all of those enormous transformer plugs. So, that's my first story for tonight. 32X. Yeah, I'm going to be... Jamie Mr. Wonderman is saying what didn't help the 32X was the Saturn released not long afterwards. So, I will be talking about that later. II1980 is saying it's another F-up of Sega of America. Well, to be fair, Bernie Stoller was in charge at that point, who was not exactly the brightest spark, let's say. So one day I might talk in depth about Bernie Stoller and the mistakes that were made, particularly by Sega of America during that era, but it won't be tonight. And I might talk about the Saturn and how that went badly wrong, but again, not tonight. For now, let's have some music. So I think we should have some music from Knuckles Chaotix. Let's have a Knuckles Chaotic OC remix. So this is Knuckles Chaotix Door into Summer by Joe Redifer from our friends over at OC Remix. I hope you enjoy. And we are back. That was Virtua Racing Deluxe ending theme from the Sega 32X version of Virtua Racing. And prior to that it was Joe Redifer's Knuckles Chaotix Door into Summer from OC Remix. Virtua Racing Deluxe, of course, was one of the best games on the 32X, so if you do happen to have the 32X, worth tracking that one down if you can. Now let's talk a bit more about some of the peripherals. Oh dear. The Sega Activator Ring. Does anyone else remember the first time everyone said that virtual reality was the future? No? Well, I'm bloody old, so I do. It was the 90s. There were those ridiculous bulky helmets in all of the arcades. I live in Sheffield, and they actually had them in the Meadowhall arcade that was open at the time. But they were really expensive, so I never went on them. Plus the helmets didn't fit me properly anyway, because I am tiny! Virtual reality was the industry buzzword of the day. There were comics and TV shows and stuff having the words virtual reality in them. Not usually understanding what they were actually talking about, but never mind. And Sega brought out a product designed to simulate the virtual reality arcade experience in your own home. It was an 8-sided hollow octagon that you laid on the floor and stepped inside. Each segment of the octagon corresponded to one of the standard Mega Drive controller buttons, so up, down, left, right, A, B, C, start. Okay? Sounds simple enough. And the idea was that you would wave your arms or feet through the infrared beams that beamed up towards the ceiling and break them to activate the assigned control. It was designed primarily to work with fighting games like Eternal Champions or Mega Drive version of Street Fighter II and other such games. I think it was it could work with Mortal Kombat as well. So the idea was that players would punch or kick in order to play. In reality, unless your ceiling was perfectly flat and smooth, the beams would get distorted, so it wouldn't work properly. So if you had a textured ceiling, which by the way extremely common, certainly in the UK in the 80s and 90s, or an inconvenient light fitting or architrave, or a ceiling fan, you were kind of out of luck. Also, remember that this is 90s infrared technology that we're talking about here. You know, from the days where you had to have your remote pointed at the precise angle to hit the sensor to change the damn TV channel. Remember those days? I do. So, as a result, the Activator Ring is not very well regarded, and is in fact often mentioned alongside the Nintendo Power Glove as one of the worst peripherals ever. Yikes. Well, I mentioned Eternal Champions earlier, so it's an excellent excuse to play some of the music from it. So, let's have some of the music from both versions of Eternal Champions, from the Mega CD and the Mega Drive. And let's start off with Eternal Champions Mega CD Midnight.
You're listening to Radio Sega, playing the best Sega music 24/7.
Again, and that was Eternal Champions Mega Drive version, Xavier's stage, and prior to that it was Eternal Champions Mega CD Midnight stage. So, as we're talking about gaming peripherals, let's go on to the Dreamcast microphone. It was one of the first microphone peripherals for a game console. It came bundled with copies of the very weird virtual pet game, Seaman. I have yet to figure out what the hell is up with that game, to be perfectly honest, and looking at the pictures gives me nightmares, because, gah, what? Just what? So, yeah, in that game you could interact with the Seaman creature. For example, the creature can ask you your birth date, and you can respond via the microphone, and he would rattle off a list of interesting things that happened on that date. Although, why you would want to communicate with that thing is beyond my reason. Oh, Japan, what hast thou wrought? Anyway, the Dreamcast microphone took up a VMU slot and was compatible with the other games such as Planet Ring and Alien Front Online. I presume that had the Dreamcast Online functionality been more successful, it would have supported voice chat, similar to how modern console microphones do. I've been told, although I've not been able to verify this, that there was actually a voice chat in the Dream Arena. But as I say, I've not been able to verify this because obviously Dream Arena's been offline for quite a while now. So just think, you could have had 12-year-olds swearing at you about your performance in a video game so many years earlier. Wouldn't that have been lovely? Rexy's saying that Seaman is definitely a creative game. Yeah. That's one way of putting it. We're also talking about the Sega Activator Ring, and people are comparing it to the Kinect and the iToy for the PlayStation. It was kind of similar to the iToy in some ways. It was also kind of similar to the dance mats. So had rhythm games actually existed back then, maybe it would have been more successful, but something that required fairly quick pace, like fighting games, it just didn't work. It just wasn't sensitive enough. Somebody was, I can't remember who it was, that was saying that the advert for it was completely amazing though. You're quite right, the advert is absolutely hilarious. You get like martial artists who are like doing moves in this circle and it's copying them on the screen, which is completely contrary to what people have actually reported about the experience of using with it. Twinny on the Discord chat is saying that the Dreamcast would have been the Xbox Live of the online gaming for little boys back in the day. And Rick is saying, imagine kids screaming obscenities over Fantasy Star Online at you. Yeah, pretty much, yeah. That's more or less how I think it would have gone just a few years earlier, but never mind. Since I don't have a huge amount of time for the music from Seaman, in the useful can call it music, it's mostly a Japanese man rambling to himself. Let's have something from Alien Front Online, which is one of the other compatible games. So this is actually a really cool soundtrack, and I'm upset that it doesn't get played more often, so play more of this please. People who request lots of things. This is Alien Front Online DC Alien Attack. Enjoy. And I am back again, and I've lost my notes, which is distressing. Yes, that was Jury and Solar Eclipse Mix from Mr. Driller, which is another game that's compatible with the Dreamcast microphone, because you can shout drill at it and it will drill. So there you go. And before that we had Alien Attack DC from Alien Front Online, which I think some of you will agree was a really, really awesome track. Now then, moving on to something that I actually have some personal experience of. The Game Gear TV Tuner. A device that you could attach to your Game Gear which will allow you to watch colour television on your Game Gear. Okay, it doesn't sound that exciting these days when you can stream Netflix to your phone from anywhere in the world, but when this was released in 1993, portable TVs were, well, frankly, they weren't very portable. They were enormous CRT monstrosities which were very heavy and often really expensive. So you could plug in the TV tuner and watch kids' TV on a tiny screen for 5 minutes until your battery ran out. Which was the main problem, since the TV tuner made the Game Gear's already short battery life into, well, something that could only be measured with a microscope, frankly. So really you needed to plug it into the AC adapter, which kind of defeats the point of it being portable. Now, I said I had personal experience of this one, and I did. A friend of mine actually had one of these, and they lived in a household with only one TV. It's not well known as well, but in some versions of the TV tuner, it actually had a TV input, so you could plug a VCR into it and play films on it, which was very useful when your dad was watching the sport on the only telly in the house and you wanted to watch cartoons, which we did. We'd kind of huddle up next to it and watch cartoons on this tiny, tiny screen. It was really quite surreal, but that was the 90s for you. Twinny's saying, remember when disposable batteries were all the rage with gaming? Yeah, I know. There was a power pack for the Game Gear, but I've only seen it once in the wild. It wasn't very common. Mr. Wonderman, Jamie is asking if it really worked. It really did. The quality often wasn't great, but it worked. It doesn't anymore because everything in the UK is switched over to the digital signal, so the analog signal doesn't exist. So you can't really use it anymore, which is quite sad. I suppose if you took it to a country that did have it, it might work. I'm not sure. Could you use the TV tuner input to record footage of games onto a VHS? Rick asks. I don't think so, because I don't think it worked that way round. But it might be possible. I wonder if I can find someone. I know at least one person who's still got a Game Gear, so I wonder if I can get them to try it. First trick would be finding a VCR. Oh well. So let's have some Game Gear music. Earlier on, I asked the Discord chat if they would like to suggest some music from the Game Gear, and who was it? It was Rick suggested the Game Gear Shinobi track, First Step, and then Mr. Jamie Wonderman suggested the unused Marble Zone soundtrack from Sonic the Hedgehog 1. So that will be coming up next. So first of all, the Game Gear Shinobi, First Step. Enjoy.
listening to Radio Sega, playing the best Sega music 24/7. Sega!
And we are back. Welcome back. That was the unused Marble Zone theme from 8-bit Sonic the Hedgehog. And prior to that, it was the Game Gear version of Shinobi, The First Step. So I hope you enjoyed those. Now then, I said I'd mention this earlier. I said I would talk about this earlier, and I will. The Sega Mega CD, or the Sega CD if you happen to be American. Released in the US in 1992, it was one of several 90s consoles to get a CD add-on. Now, the Mega Drive was always produced with an expansion port, so there had always been plans to attach something to it. It's commonly thought by most gaming historians that the original plan was for the add-on to be a floppy drive, similar to the Famicom Disk System that was released for the original Famicom in Japan. And some people have suggested that it might have been combined with an inexpensive keyboard and tablet to essentially turn the Mega Drive into a low-cost home computer. However, that never happened for whatever reason, possibly because optical storage media, CDs, was becoming a lot cheaper to produce compared to traditional cartridge-based storage. It was also a lot less volatile than floppy disk or cassette. By that I mean that the data was a lot harder to overwrite and a lot harder to get damaged by electromagnetic interference. So when the CD add-on was released for the PC Engine in 1988, Sega decided that they were going to follow suit. Sadly, when it was released, the unit was seen by most people as overpriced, particularly in America and Europe. And so few of the early Mega CD games took advantage of the approved technology, with the add-on library largely being dominated by the FMV games, particularly in the USA. Added to that, the CD games were also more expensive than cartridge games, despite the CDs being easier and cheaper to produce, which a lot of gamers saw as a bit of a slap in the face. Not surprising. A trend that was then later reversed when we got to the PlayStation era, with CD-based games being a lot less expensive than the cartridge-based games for the Nintendo console at the time. As with the Mega Drive, there were two versions of the Mega CD. The original version was designed to sit under the Mega Drive and work best with the original Mega Drive 1 console. I've seen one of these in the flesh, and it kind of looks a bit, I don't know, shoddy. Considering that it was well known for having quite a lot of build quality problems. There was a lot of errors and faults that could develop with that early version. The second version, the Mega CD 2, sits alongside the Mega Drive to the right hand side, if you're looking at it directly, and works best with the Mega Drive 2 console. It fixed many of the early quality problems and is generally seen as the better version of the console. And I have, certainly in the UK, seen a lot more of the Mega Drive 2s than I've seen the original model. I've seen one original model, it's owned by a friend of mine, and it sort of works. Sort of. Jamie's asking me if I've heard of the Sega CD32X games. I have. I did have a list of them somewhere. Let me just see if I can dig it up. Talk amongst yourselves. Right, there were 5 games that were released that were for both, that would took advantage of the technology of the Sega 32X and the Mega CD, and they were Corpse Killer, Fahrenheit, Night Trap, a re-release of Night Trap, not the original, Slam City, and Supreme Warrior. There was another game that was released bizarrely just in Brazil called Surgical Strike, which was another of these Mega CD 32X games. There were another at least 6 titles that were in development but were dropped, some just being released just for Mega CD and some moved on to the Sega Saturn. So, there you go. Oh, the Rick's talking about the multi-mega. Yeah, I mentioned that in an earlier episode. One of the combined consoles that were tacked onto something else. There were even things like IBM PCs that had Mega Drives and Mega CDs built into them. It was really quite bizarre. So yeah, the Wonder Mega, the XI, I think it was called. There were another couple that were kicking around. But yeah, let's have some music. Let's have, it's already started actually, let's have Stardust Speedway. This is the the Generations remix by Jun Senoway. Enjoy. And we are back, and as Rexy has correctly said, that was one of Sadov's Echo 2 The Tides of Time Medusa remixes. I quite like that one, and he's done some really good ones, so I have no objections. And prior to that, it was Stardust Speedway Generations remix. I said it was Jin Senoway. Rexy has actually corrected me. It's the guys from Cash Cash with some of Jin Senoway's work. So, apologies, I got that wrong. We'll get it right eventually. People in the chat are discussing the different models of Mega Drive that they have. I happen to have a Mega Drive 2, so that's my preference, I guess. I don't really have much of a preference, but I have my Mega Drive 2. It has pretty red buttons. It's fine. So let's carry on with what we're talking about. So, third-party controllers are a bit of a controversial subject. You can find some really excellent ones out there, but there's also some really terrible, shoddily made garbage floating around. And then there were companies that like to experiment, like Triax Technologies, creators of the Turbo Touch 360. Now, despite the name, it's got nothing to do with the Xbox, which is just as well because this is a Sega show. It was, in fact, a third-party controller for the Mega Drive. And it doesn't have a D-pad. Yes, you heard me. It doesn't have a D-pad. What it actually has, in place of where the traditional D-pad should be located, is a weird-looking tracking sensor thing that purports to track the motion of your left thumb without needing to actually push downwards upon it. It's a filthy lie. Now, the lack of tactile feedback and the tracking sensor's variable sensitivity made it awkward and uncomfortable to use for most people. Me included. I have tried one of these things. It's awful. You can't tell where your thumb is. It kind of has a vague inclination as to when it can be bothered to actually pick up your inputs. It's terrible. Do not recommend one of these things. Then, speaking of experiments, there's the Simulator 2 Action Chair, which looked basically like those uncomfortable plastic school chairs that you may remember from days gone by, or if you're still there, you poor sod, with an odd metal frame bolted to the bottom of it. That's what it looked like. Although, actually, it was a pretty cool accessory that allowed you to move in 8 different directions on pivot points, while controlling games such as Super Thunderblade, Super Monaco GP, and Afterburner using joystick controls on either side of the seat. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't able to find a huge amount of information about these things, but I can't really seem to find any information about how well this actually worked. Certainly it was about as close as you could get to having the arcade seat experience in your own home, but apparently this thing was fairly rare. If somebody can give me some more information on this, I'd be really interested to find out about it, because I would like to know more about this thing because it looks interesting. But yeah, if you can give me some information, that'd be really awesome. Now, speaking of Afterburner, I think we should have Afterburner. Yes, that sounds like a good idea. So, Afterburner, Afterburner. Enjoy!
You're listening to Radio Sega, playing the best Sega music 24/7. Sega!
And we are back, and I was going to play another track from Super Monaco GP after that one, but then I realised the tracks are really long and I'm running out of time. So, maybe next time. So I've got a question for you all. What is it with Sega and their planet names? You know, Mars, Saturn, Neptune. Oh yes, the Neptune. Or are they naming them after Roman gods and being really ambitious? I don't know. Whatever. The Neptune. Now, it was meant to be a combined Mega Drive, 32X and Mega CD to address the problems with the expense and aesthetics of the 32X and the early build quality problems of the Mega CD. However, by the time the Neptune managed to get around to prototyping stage, the Saturn was almost ready for release. From what I've managed to find out, part of the problem here came from a miscommunication between Sega of America and Sega of Japan, because Sega of Japan wanted an entirely new console, and Sega of America didn't. So Sega of Japan went ahead and created one anyway, and then got around to telling Sega of America, who already had the Sega Neptune almost ready to go. So that went well. I could do an entire show about how Sega's left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing, but maybe I will, maybe I won't. If you guys are interested in the mistakes that Sega made during that particular period, give me a shout, let me know, and I'll see about putting together a show based on that topic, if you're interested. So, not wanting to cannibalise its own sales of the Saturn, Sega dropped the Neptune and instead focused on the Saturn. Much good that did them. Had the Neptune made it to release, it would have been priced at around £200 in the UK or $149.99 in the US, and it would have come bundled with the 32X version of Virtua Fighter, which is actually a pretty good game. It's not known how many prototypes of that console were made. Now, there's one that belongs to the Video Game History Museum collection, which I think is based in Dallas, Texas. And you can occasionally see it touring for display at various gaming events. However, that's just a dummy unit, there are no actual electronics inside it, it's just designed to show people how the unit would have looked. There has been talk of others that have been found, and that included an article by Electronic Gaming Monthly, which later turned out to be a hoax, because that's the sort of thing that Electronic Gaming Monthly does. Trust me, just don't read EGM in April. Lies, lies and more lies. But, as we all know from things like the American prototype of the Nintendo 64 disk system turning up, and the recent discovery of the Nintendo PlayStation prototype, these things can turn up years after the fact. So maybe someday we will get to see a proper prototype of the Sega Neptune. That would be pretty cool. And of course, the Neptune lives on in spirit through the Hyperdimension Neptunia games. So to finish off for tonight, I'm going to play you Nepgear's theme from Hyperdimension Neptunia Rebirth. Thank you ever so much for listening. Thanks to everyone who was in the Discord chat. Thanks to anyone who's listening and not in chat. I've been Skyblaze. This has been The Hidden Palace on Radio Sega. This is Nepgear's theme from Hyperdimension Neptunia Rebirth, and I will see you all next week. Good night.
Enjoyed the show? Check out the full Radio Sega live schedule at radiose.ga/shows. Radio Sega, playing the best Sega music 24/7.